Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Non-Moving Pictures, where we examine movie posters as art. Today, we're looking at one of the most iconic movie posters of all time, attached to one of the most iconic films of all time. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, we have the movie poster for Jaws.
Let's be clear, folks. The poster for Jaws is quite possibly one of the most iconic movie posters ever made. Quite frankly, it may be one of the most iconic images in all of artistic history. I mean, sure, it may not have the same level of legacy as something like the Mona Lisa or the Sistine Chapel ceiling or something, but let's be honest here. You look at this image, you instantly know what it is, even if you don't see the title. It is an image that has come to represent sharks just as much as seeing a dorsal fin in the water. Heck, it's come to represent not just sharks, but water monsters in general. I guarantee you that even though Lake Placid is a movie about a crocodile in fresh water, the poster was directly inspired by Jaws. Now, of course, we must also acknowledge that the poster is based on the cover for Peter Benchley's original novel, but when you look at that cover, it doesn't quite say shark, despite being the exact same image, more or less. I honestly don't know what that is, frankly, but it doesn't look like a shark to me. But we're not here to judge a book by its cover. We're looking at a movie poster here. So what is it about this poster that works? Well, obviously it draws directly from the movie, representing an iconic scene, in fact, the opening scene of the film. But then again, you don't necessarily know that when you first see this image. All you know is that a shark is about to eat that woman. But still, why does it make for such a great image? Well, let's start with the most obvious thing, the shark itself. Like I said, this image is the same as what we got on the original book cover, but the original book cover didn't necessarily scream shark. It just looked sort of like an amorphous white blob with a slit in it. This, on the poster, is clearly a shark, and the emphasis is on the title element, the jaws. That is the business end of the shark right there, prominently displayed, agape, full of some jagged and razor-sharp looking teeth. This is the part of the shark you do not want to ever be staring down, and yet there it is, unavoidable. Even taking into account that sharks are not ruthless killers, something which the book and movie unfortunately wound up unintentionally perpetuating, which caused a lot of destruction, but that's a whole other subject, you still know that if a shark is baring its teeth as it's coming towards you, that is not a good sign. Not to mention, the sheer scale of the shark is very impressive. Now, as is the case with most monster movie posters, the size is greatly exaggerated. The great white shark in Jaws is certainly big, but it's not that big. That is more akin to a megalodon. Speaking of which, The Meg is another movie that took inspiration from Jaws during its ad campaign. But the point of exaggerating the size of a monster on these posters is to make them a greater threat, figuratively speaking. It's pretty common to associate size with danger. The bigger something is, the more dangerous something is. Granted, that is partly circumstantial. Just because something is big doesn't make it inherently dangerous, but you do have to respect the size and power of it, otherwise it could be dangerous. In the animal kingdom especially, size is considered something to stay away from. That's why when you go hiking in the woods and you come across a bear or a mountain lion, you are told to make yourself look big and imposing so that bear or mountain lion won't harm you. Again, not that they will just go out of their way to harm you, but just to be safe, you know? Hedge your bets. But the only thing scarier than a large thing on the land is a large thing in the sea, because the sea itself is large. And as such, it's always been seen as sort of a mysterious and dangerous thing for humans. And that's just the environment itself. The things that lurk within that environment, man, entire books have been written about that. Although speaking of water, this poster might also have a reason for why the shark looks bigger, because of refraction. yeah, that's not it at all because it's a painting. Obviously, it's just meant to make the shark look scarier. Still, the fact remains, it is one of the most recognizable images of a shark you could ever depict. Again, second only to the dorsal fin breaking the surface of the water. This image is so iconic, in fact, that the posters for every Jaws sequel tried finding ways to bring that image back, whether or not it actually looked good. Perhaps the most awkward example is Jaws the Revenge. Because, look at that. Doesn't that just look kinda silly, even though it's the exact same angle of the shark? But it's just not the same. Seeing a shark shooting literally straight out of the water like that just doesn't work as well as seeing a shark still underwater shooting straight up towards an unknowing swimmer. Speaking of which, let's talk about her for a moment. Because you see, this poor unsuspecting woman is the other half of the equation. Like I said, what we're seeing here is a scene depicted from the movie, the very first scene in which the shark claims its first victim. But why did they pick that scene specifically? They could have picked any scene. Heck, they didn't even need to pick a scene from the movie, they could have just made up a scene, or done some sort of image that gets forth the idea without necessarily drawing directly from the source material. Well, before we get too far into that, there is something we need to address. This woman is skinny dipping.
Well, great. Thanks to the inability of an algorithm to distinguish between something dirty and something artistic, there's a chance this video might not get monetized. Well, we're in it now, so I'm just gonna go for it.
Okay, so even though this image isn't technically showing any of the details, you can still tell that this woman is not wearing a bathing suit. She's not wearing anything, in fact. So, did they just go with this image to be scintillating? Not necessarily. Remember, we are talking about art here, and in art, nudity doesn't necessarily mean what most people think it means. Sure, it can mean that, but there is such a thing as artistic nudity. In those contexts, we could be seeing other metaphorical representations of states of being, or perhaps just celebrating the human form. That part clearly doesn't apply to this poster, and even though this is from the movie, maybe there's a more artistic reason why this was chosen specifically for the poster. Metaphorically speaking, there are two things which nudity can represent that apply here: innocence and vulnerability. Innocence can come in several forms. It can mean purity, meaning someone has not been tainted by the corruption and sin of the world, sort of like Adam and Eve. Or it can mean ignorance, meaning the subject is so clueless and so detached from how the world works that they forgot to put pants on and don't think anything's wrong with it until someone explains why. Then they're not ignorant anymore. Well, maybe. And as for vulnerability, well, clothing in a way can be seen as a form of protection. Obviously, you have things like armor, bulletproof vests, and things like that, but for the most part, clothing is used as a barrier to shield yourself from people. That can either be to hide yourself because you're ashamed, or to put forth a particular image that makes people think of you in a particular way. You wear your best clothes to a job interview to make yourself look professional and hireable. You are protecting yourself from the possibility of being seen as a slob. To have those clothes removed, to have that protection taken away, leaves you in your most vulnerable state, where you have nothing to protect you. Both of these interpretations apply to our hapless swimmer here. The innocence/ignorance interpretation applies because clearly she has no clue the shark is there. She's just swimming along without a care in the world, unaware that she's about to get swallowed whole. And as for vulnerability, that's obvious. She's a sitting duck, or swimming duck as it were. True, a bathing suit probably wouldn't provide that much protection against a shark of any kind, let alone one of that size, but not having that suit really emphasizes that she is toast. And so, when you take an image that juxtaposes the ignorant, defenseless swimmer with the massive, dangerous sea monster, it all comes together to form an image that everyone recognizes all over the world. There is no denying it. The Jaws movie poster is truly iconic artwork. We have looked at iconic movie posters in this series before, but it's quite possible that Jaws tops them all. And why shouldn't it?
It's only fitting that the Ultimate Shark movie should have the Ultimate Shark image attached to it. I'm sure most of you already knew what a great poster this was, but maybe this has given you a new appreciation for it. Either way, it's definitely one of the best we'll see on this show. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Next time, we'll see what happens when a movie poster takes liberties with what it's representing.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.